so glad that you are all here today to witness what is going to be a really cool little seminar. We've not done this yet during the show, but it should be good fun. So over the last few days, we've been doing seminars in here where we've introduced kind of single products or single applications to people. But with flight simulation, the world does kind of work best when you start to combine all of these services and all these products into one kind of ecosystem. And that's really what today is going to be all about. So we have a team of two incredible people, two teams of incredible people here today. So we have the VATSIM team, and we've also got the FlyByWire simulations team as well. And what they're going to do is they're going to demonstrate to you a full A320 flight on VATSIM. So anything could happen in this flight, but it's going to be a really experience. And whilst they're doing that as well, you're also going to get some really cool key information about how that does work as well. So without further ado, we've got some fantastic guests in the corner, and then we've also got our two leads to come on stage as well. So please put your hands together for them.
Hello, hello. Okay. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm David, representing VATSIM today, and I'm joined today by...
My name is Valentin. I'm representing the FlyByWire side on this live flight today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and so today, obviously, I'd like to welcome you on board our flight, FlyByWire, departing from Groningen, or Eelde, and inbound to Rotterdam, flown by our pilot flying, Aaron, and joining is pilot monitoring, Dmitry. Please welcome them. So obviously over the past 2 days, like Callum said, we've seen a lot of different things. Amongst them, FlyByWire has been on stage yesterday, previewing the A380. But I mean, just for the basics and just for the people that don't know, Valentin, what is FlyByWire?
Yeah, I'll just introduce our team real quickly. So we are an organization of freeware contributors who are working on developing an A320neo for Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's a project that started by improving basically the default A320neo for MSFS. And it's grown basically from there. We started out making small improvements and just changing little things here and there. But I think it's really grown into a large community of people contributing code and people writing documentation and a bunch of different people coming together and providing their expertise in different areas in order to make this a really cool product, I think. And we're excited to show you this in this live demonstration.
Very nice. And so FlyByWire's star product, the A32NX. First of all, how much does it cost?
It's entirely free. I'm happy to report that. Yeah, and it will stay free.
Yeah, that's great. Obviously, I think it's quite amazing to see that we have such high quality freeware tools available. So obviously, we have the FlyByWire A32NX, but also VATSIM. Obviously, that's what I came to talk about today. VATSIM is also a freeware tool, and you don't need to pay anything if you want to join VATSIM. It's completely free. It's for those of you that don't know, it's a virtual air traffic simulation network that is designed to connect pilots and air traffic controllers, virtual air traffic controllers, where they are able to control the pilots. But if we just, well, obviously we're starting up the flight here by the looks of it. So if we just talk a bit about the aircraft that is loading up right now, what are some of the new features, or what are some of the features or new features that have been featured in the A32NX lately?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been working on actually that some of you might have noticed is we've been working on a further improvement to the flight model, specifically the behavior in the flare, which is basically the very last stage of the flight just before you touch down. And it's a very interesting thing because it's something that's very characteristic to the Airbus and the Airbus A320 specifically. And we really worked quite hard with a bunch of pilots, real A320neo pilots and engineers who've been able to provide us very valuable feedback in order to get the feeling just before you touch down right, and as you would expect it from the real aircraft. So yeah, I think it's really exciting, and I encourage everyone to give it a go and yeah, try it out.
And what are you looking to develop in the future? What is the roadmap looking like?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I've been working very hard on is the new version of the FMS, the Flight Management System. So maybe for those people that don't know, the Flight Management System is basically an automation system on the aircraft that pilots use to program in their route, and they'll be able to rely on their flight management system to guide the autopilot along from their origin to their destination, alongside a bunch of other things. And one of the things I've been working on with the new version of this flight management system is that the pilot will not just be able to fly from their route to their destination, but will also be able to program in a route from their destination to an alternate destination in case things go wrong. They will also be able to fly the missed approach procedures if they have to abort their approach and go around. And all of these things that really make the Airbus what it is, and a very futuristic airplane and a very modern airplane, and with all the features that people would expect. So we've been working very hard on this, and we hope that we can make it public very soon.
Yeah, because I think it's quite incredible how a huge difference to flying in real life versus flying on the sim is that a lot of the, I mean, in real life, typical A320, you have two pilots, pilot flying, pilot monitoring. But on VATSIM, no, well, not on VATSIM, just in flight sim in general, it's typically just one pilot doing it, doing everything, right? One pilot having to click all the buttons, having to talk to air traffic control, etc. So it's quite good that you have that you're going to be working on new features that is going to be able to relieve, I guess, the main pilot flying from that.
Indeed, I think you bring up a very good point. I think it's something that is a very useful tool to the pilot, but also a tool that people should familiarize themselves with and how to use it, because it's not just an assistance feature that you can turn on and take your hands off and sip your coffee. It's something that you have to understand and something that you have to know how to use. And what it helps you do is not just lean back, as I said. What it helps you do is focus on maybe some of the more long-term things instead of focusing on flying the airplane in a straight line. It allows you to prepare for what's to come, especially when you're on a virtual air traffic control network like VATSIM, where it's always good to think ahead and maybe think of what radio call you're going to get next, or what the controller is going to tell you to do next. And I think that's really how the automation features like an autopilot, like an auto thrust system are meant to be used. Yeah.
And talking about preparing for your flight and just preparing things, we have just connected to the VATSIM network, as you can see. What you saw there was vPilot, which is the main pilot client, I guess the most known pilot client used on VATSIM for Microsoft Flight Simulator at least. So we've just connected. Our flight call sign is FlyByWire 32. Now, just to speed things up, we don't have too much time. Just to speed things up, we were on the stand already with our engines on, and we want to try to move on quicker. So what we see to my right, actually, is we have the EFB, and we've just imported the flight plan. Now, I understand correctly that the flight plan was generated on SimBrief, Navigraph's flight planning feature.
That is indeed correct, and one of the things that we've also done in order to speed up this whole setup process is that we've used one of the aircraft state presets in the FlyByWire A32NX. So what you saw one of the pilots do is, as you can see here, they just press the ready for taxi button, and automatically all of the systems that you will need to set up will be set up automatically. So it only takes a few seconds, and it's very great if you need to save time, if you maybe don't have time for an entire flight and the entire setup, and it will make sure that everything's set up correctly. And maybe jumping off of what you said with the SimBrief, what you can also do in the FlyByWire A32NX is actually uplink your flight plan from SimBrief directly into the aircraft. So the navigation system that I talked about earlier, you can basically at the press of a button, you can load your entire SimBrief plan into the flight management system, which is actually similar to ACAR's features that the real aircraft would have.
Yeah, I mean, realism is one thing, but when you have a wife or mother that is going to call you for dinner at 7, then it might be a good idea to speed things up sometimes, no?
Indeed, yeah. I think that's one of the great things about flight simulation is that, you have these systems that can help you really basically perform your hobby, even if you have limited time.
Yeah. You spoke a bit about the feature of being able to uplink your flight plan to the MCDU, or the McDo, some people like to call it. So that's just one of many features that enhance the automation and also allow a smoother experience. I thought a bit about some of the features that are available specifically for VATSIM, right? What automation features are available to increase your VATSIM, what's the word? To improve your VATSIM experience?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of features in the FMS that have arrived in the FlyByWire A32Next that especially VATSIM pilots have been very happy about. And to maybe name one specifically, it's the feature to let the aircraft automatically hold. So fly a holding pattern at a specific waypoint. I know I've certainly flown into Amsterdam on VATSIM, and it's very common to get a holding pattern assigned there. And I don't know if who of you is a real pilot, but flying a holding pattern, I'm not a real pilot, but I can imagine that flying a holding pattern manually is a lot of hard work, especially when you're a single pilot. And so I think that's a fantastic feature to help pilots, especially also get started faster on VATSIM if they are just getting into flight simulation and they want to get started on the VATSIM network. It's good to have a feature like that in your flight management system because it can really help you and relieve some of the workload and help you prepare for the later situations.
Yeah, and I actually remember you mentioned a very good point, because I remember I started out on VATSIM and generally flight simulation in about 2016, 2017. And I remember at the time, we had a lot of freeware aircraft, and I flew on FSX at the time. But everyone said, oh, but if you want to fly properly on VATSIM, if you want to be able to actually fly navigationally correctly, you need to buy a payware aircraft. And I think that's been sort of the gist of VATSIM for quite a long time. So the fact that the FlyByWire, a freeware aircraft, is able to feature a lot of these different things, for example, things that you wouldn't get from a freeware aircraft, holding, for example, better navigational capabilities. I think that's an extraordinary thing that we're able to get that from a freeware aircraft, and no less something that is developed by such a dedicated team of volunteers that aren't really getting paid for this.
I think it's just as much as people on FlyByWire like me like making these planes and like seeing people's reactions, and I think it's one of the things that's really great about an event like FS Weekend. You get to actually see a lot of people flying the planes and people being really enthusiastic and really complimenting the plane, and it warms my heart. And I think it's just as much a hobby for us that we just like doing. For me personally, I like working on the plane, and I like seeing all of these automation features come to life myself. I'm a very novice VATSIM pilot, but it's something that I do enjoy, and I think it's something that's really cool about representing an Airbus like this. And I think it's always been sort of our motto and our passion to make this really as a high fidelity product and make it as realistic as possible.
Yeah. So, Aaron, Dimitri, how are we doing? Oh, we just we're just ready soon, in a few minutes, I'm guessing. We're going to be calling up for clearance. I'm not sure which ATC is currently online. Just to, I guess, give you guys an overview a bit of ATC, and the ATC specifically here at FS Weekend. Dutch VCC, the Dutch part of VATSIM, is currently having a stand in one of the, they're having a stand here in one of the buildings, and they're controlling from here. So I think, I'm not sure if all of the voices that we're gonna be hearing are gonna be from the same building, but at least some of the voices that you hear, you can actually meet those people in the neighboring room, actually, I think, maybe even. So I think that's something nice. If you guys want to check it out, you can go visit their stand if you want to ask questions or see even what the scope looks like, and to see how we operate. You can have a look at that.
Yeah, so maybe as they're just setting up the aircraft.
I think I know what's going on. I think we need to pre-file a flight plan because that's probably something that's not done. So obviously, in all stages of flight, just in general in aviation, you always need to follow a flight plan, both in the real world and on VATSIM as well. And this is actually what the pre-filing page looks like. Just behind these windows, you file your basic flight plan, destination, just flight information. And I think you can see that actually all of this is already filled in. That's because SimBrief has an amazing feature where you're able to click a button, pre-file your flight plan right here, and it automatically pre-files your flight plan. There's 2 or 3 clicks of buttons. But we were talking about SimBrief a lot, and SimBrief is obviously a product from Navigraph. And you can see you've got some remarks here. We love ATC, towards the end I see as well. But Navigraph then. You guys have been working a bit with Navigraph and implementing Navigraph into your EFB. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, exactly. So Navigraph, for those who don't know, is a company that provides navigation data and navigational charts for flight simulation. If you've not seen their product, an instrument chart or a navigation chart, as I mentioned, is basically what tells pilot where to fly, how to fly, their procedures. And it is something that is, of course, very important to the real world. Air traffic control rely on pilots consulting charts and making sure they're aware of how the procedures work. And just like that, Navigraph have quite an inexpensive option of obtaining charts that you can use for flight simulation in order to once again increase immersion like you do with an air traffic control network like VATSIM.
Yeah. Obviously, you mentioned Navigraph is an... yeah, we have ATC just coming up. We're starting to hear some ATC sound. But you mentioned that Navigraph is an inexpensive product. So you still have to pay for it, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately. I think it's an amazing product. But we all know that we have... I think we've all been in a situation where some of us haven't been able to purchase a subscription. When I was 13 years old, my budget was quite limited from what I got from my parents. So some of the free features that are available to VATSIMers, for chart specifically, there's one service that I'm aware of, it's called ChartFox as well. It's an alternative to Navigraph. I think you get a lot of amazing features with Navigraph, a lot of good integrations, but ChartFox is one of the features that is available, that is a free alternative to Navigraph. Yeah, just so that you guys are aware of that.
Yeah, indeed, I think we're getting more and more ready for this flight, and I think it's soon going to be the... Okay, I think it's, as you can see, the frequency is getting more and more busy.
Maybe us getting the clearance now.
Awesome. You heard it there first. That was our crew getting their ATC clearance from the air traffic control. Why don't you tell us about what that clearance contained, maybe, for those unfamiliar?
The clearance contains, first of all, information on where you're going. You're clear to destination. We're going to Rotterdam. We got a departure instruction, so SID, the procedure that we're going to fly outbound from Groningen. And we could have gotten a runway, but we know pretty much what runway we're going to depart based on either the ATIS or even the SID. You know, if you're using Navigraph charts, you can see that most of the time, at least in Europe, the SID will correspond to a specific runway. We could have gotten an initial flight level, so initial flight level to maintain. We're ready for pushback now as well.
FlyByWire 3 to Roger, the start is approved. Runway 23, Q&A from 0 to 0.
Roger, start approved, and we have already started up request taxi.
FlyByWire 3 to Roger, text to holding point, Sierra 1, runway 3, via Alpha.
Sierra 123 via Alpha, FlyByWire 32.
So there we got a startup clearance. We're already started up, so we got the taxi clearance immediately. We're taxiing now, just starting our taxi to runway 23. But just to finish off real quick, so that clearance contained an initial flight level to maintain, and last but not least, a squawk for the aircraft to maintain. That is, I'm not sure if we got squawk 1000 or another squawk, but basically it allows ATC to identify us. So we're just starting out our rollout, our taxi here. and we're probably going to be doing some checklists, but you know more about that than I do, Valentin.
Yeah, so I don't know if our pilots have the checklist, are using the checklist in the electronic flight bag, which is our EFB, the tablet on the left, or if they have paper checklists available. But in any case, it's one of the features that we also have in the EFB, the checklist that real Airbus pilots would use and that Airbus actually publishes to fly the Airbus. Now, what I should say is that a checklist is not a complete guide on how to start up and fly the aircraft, actually. For that, you'll have to look into other documentation, which brings me to the next point of our document.
Are you ready?
One second.
FlightByWire 2, runway 3, clear for takeoff. 130, big 3, 108.
Alright, 3-2, clear to take off, FlightByWire 3-2.
So, our takeoff clearance, we are now clear for takeoff, runway 23. And after departure, then we follow the SID, Standard Instrument Departure procedure that is assigned by ATC. But how do we actually, how do pilots know what to follow? How do pilots know how to follow this SID? What tools do they have available?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's it brings me back.
Oh, we've lost our microphone, I think. Oh,
Sorry about that. At the end of the day, it brings me back to the navigational charts that I mentioned earlier. So the pilots will check the charts on Navigraph or ChartFox or whatever they find the charts, which describes essentially what procedure to fly. And they'll certainly brief that with each other. They'll talk about what they do, and they'll make sure that the flight management computer, the flight management system, which will guide the pilots where to fly to follow the procedure, is set up correctly, and that all of the waypoints that you want to fly to are actually programmed correctly.
Cool, right. We are lined up for departure. Time has started. We are rolling. Mantoga. That's the rest. Runway to thrust blue. Oh, that's not my job to say, but said it anyway.
Second nature at this point.
Second nature. I was in one of the simulators today, and I kept saying it. So for this flight is quite a short flight. But I want to talk about a feature called CPDLC. Now, I understand it correctly that you guys have it. I was visiting one of the demos for another aircraft today, and I was checking whether or not they have CPDLC implemented, and not yet, at least. But why don't you tell me about CPDLC?
Yeah, so I'm really hoping I'm going to get the acronym right. I think CPDLC is Controller Pilot Data Link Communication System. Maybe you can correct me on that. But what it is it's in simple words, it's kind of like text messaging for pilots. And instead of, as you heard before, talking to...
FlightByWire 3-2, contact yield approach 120.305 tot ziens.
120.305 FlightByWire 3-2.
Awesome. That was them getting handed off to the next frequency, who is also going to be a staff position. But yeah, just quickly, CPDLC is a way for pilots and air traffic control to communicate with each other without relying on text communication. Instead, it's done via this little...
FlightByWire 3-2 on the EGNOS 2 Delta passing by level 3.
FlightByWire 3-2, yield approach, good afternoon, identified.
Instead, this CPDLC is done via this display that you can see at the bottom of the screen. And as we said, we're not using it on this flight because it's a very short flight, but the FlyByWire A32NX supports it together with the air traffic control clients.
From a controller's perspective, I've actually spoken to a real-world controller.
FlightByWire 3-2, contact Amsterdam radar 125.750, have a good flight.
Second frequency, FlightByWire 3-2.
25.
FlightByWire 3-2, second frequency.
Amsterdam radar 125.750, bye-bye.
Amsterdam 125.750, bye-bye, FlightByWire 3-2.
So now we have a frequency change to Amsterdam radar.
Clear Raccoon to Alpha and 18 right, approach into Skidmore and the 325.
So what you heard a few times today is people getting handed off between different frequencies, so from one air traffic control sector to another. And it's really impressive to see because that's, of course, exactly what you would expect in real life. There's many positions. Now, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about which positions are also staffed on VATSIM compared to real life. Can I expect all positions to be staffed, or?
Very good question. So obviously, all VATSIM air traffic controllers are complete volunteers.
Goeiedag, FlyByWire 32, inbound DIFPA, flight level 70.
Just checking in with Amsterdam here. And just like Amsterdam Radar, who is sitting in the neighboring building, he is also a volunteer.
0 and 43 Romeo arrival. It's possible to get vectors for the ILS?
Confirm your request in the ILS?
Affirm vectors for the ILS 24.
Roger, expect ILS approach on day 06.
Roger.
So we have now our arrival clearance, our star clearance, and we would also like to get some vectors for arrival. But no, like I said, all VATSIM air traffic controllers are complete volunteers. So because of that, you don't always find air traffic controllers online. When they're not online, people are on what's known as a Unicom frequency. There's no ATC. You fly at your own discretion. However, we have what's known as events. These events are specific events featuring maybe one airport or maybe two airports where you fly from A to B, or maybe it's got you've got an area covering multiple airports that is being staffed. So in these events, you're guaranteed to get air traffic control, and there's quite a lot of pilots or quite a lot of aircraft that are expected on these events. It's an amazing opportunity to get staffed, to get ATC staffing, and typically they also happen during evenings and during the weekends when people have free time. And to add as well, we have something also known as top-down. I'm not going to get too much into detail about that, but basically the way it works is a center controller can be covering the approach and ground and tower positions top-down when those other positions aren't online, so that we can get more ATC coverage for the pilots flying.
So you mentioned that all of these VATSIM air traffic controllers are actually volunteers. How does one even get started to man a position like this?
Very good question. It's very easy to get started. All you need is a VATSIM account and I guess good motivation to learn. If you want to get started, you need to join a division, maybe a subdivision of VCC or an RTEC. So you pick a place where you want to start. For example, it could be the Netherlands, Dutch VCC you could join. Let's say I join the Dutch VCC, then you start ATC training, you start to train from the ground up. You first learn how to control delivery and then ground. The training, again, is completely free and it's run by volunteers, but there's a lot of resources that are available, and all you really need to have is good motivation, and you'll be on your way to becoming one of the voices on frequency.
That is fantastic to hear. So one of the earlier air traffic control calls that you heard was them getting their arrival information. So I think if I heard it correctly, they're getting radar vectors. So that's basically air traffic control telling them what directions to fly in order to get them aligned with the instrument landing system, the ILS. And I think today, maybe something we can talk about today, the weather conditions are quite good, to my knowledge, in Rotterdam. But one of the features that you have in the FlyByWire A32X, when the weather is not so good, is that you can let the aircraft auto-land. The aircraft can actually land itself on an instrument landing system. So that's definitely very good if you're maybe not so confident in the visibility at your destination. You can just set up the aircraft to land itself.
I think I can say without any shame that during my first year of flying, maybe 90% of my landings were done on autoland. Probably one of the reasons I'm not so good at my landings today. But, yeah. So that's not a call for us, but you can see then we have programmed in the arrival, the standard arrival route, which we got, as you said, we got earlier. And it's, yeah, we mentioned already that it's very important, obviously, to be able to fly them on the VATSIM network, and it's important to have the
Expecting vectors for the ILS 2 for FlyByWire 32, thank you.
Yeah, and we have vectors. We expecting vectors. So I want to talk a bit about if you're a new pilot and want to join. So I guess we've talked a bit about VATSIM, but what resources do new pilots have available if they want to get started flying the FlyByWire 320?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I brought it up a bit earlier already. We have a fantastic resource available. It's a beginner's guide to people wanting to learn the FlyByWire A32NX. It basically teaches you all of the setup, all of the things that you've seen so far in text form, and there's a lot of pictures, and it teaches you how to do things like get the navigation charts, find departure frequencies. All of these things are basically in the form of this text guide that is available on our website, flybywiresim.com, and it will basically teach you the entire setup step by step. And I think one of the things that's really good to do is, take your time to set up the airplane and try to fly all of this. And you can even go through it maybe multiple times if you're not sure about certain things here and there. And then at the end of the day, if you still have questions, I'd like to advertise our Discord server a little bit, the FlyByWire Discord server. We have a fantastic community of many people and even real-life pilots that are able to provide very valuable assistance in people wanting to learn to fly the A32NX, and that can provide very valuable insights into real-life procedures as well, actually.
I think it's quite amazing how we have such an amazing community that is able to provide all of this help and support, and that is generally very friendly to new pilots that want to join. I can definitely say the same for VATSIM. Our VATSIM members are quite accommodating to new members, especially VATSIM air traffic controllers as well. A lot of new pilots are scared of ATC, but everyone has to start somewhere. So our controllers are quite accommodating. But other than that, I want to talk a bit about what resources VATSIM has available other than that. On VATSIM, we have, for example, what's known as the Pilot Learning Center, as it's now called. The Pilot Learning Center has a lot of different tools, but also a lot of different guides available. Not just for radio communication on the actual network, but also some general aviation knowledge that you could learn if you want to learn that. Other than that, we have what's known as First Wings. Now, First Wings is a series of events that is hosted at least once a month. That is which has a focus on trying to help new pilots get better and get more confident on the network. It's hosted in different parts of the world on VATSIM. And if you want to learn more about different, new things that you can check, let me start again. If you want to learn more about the different things that VATSIM has to offer for new pilots, you can visit the website, vatsim.net. And you can also join the VATSIM community server. There's a lot of different useful information there. There's also a channel called VATSIM SOAR, which has a lot of interesting tips and facts about certain specific procedures that could be useful to learn. So,
I don't know, David, I think things are getting serious here. I just heard them getting handed off to the approach controller, who is, as far as I know, going to vector them, give them headings to the final approach, the instrument landing system, and I think the pilots have just set up the MCDU for their approach. They've put in a bunch of information that the plane needs to compute the correct approach speeds, for example, compute a descent profile, all of these things that will help the pilots conduct the approach.
And how do you know what you need to put in? Like, where do you get all this information? And is it always the same numbers, or do the numbers change? Or?
Sadly, it's not always the same numbers, no. But it's a good question, because there's different ways you can get information and different things you need to put in. So one of the things you put in is your...
Checking in with approach.
Hello, expect runway 24.
2432. Perfect. So they just got assigned the runway, which brings you to the point that one of the things you have to tell the flight management computer is the wind. This is what the aircraft uses to give the correct approach speed. And where you would find that typically is from some weather service. Pilots use meteorological information called the METAR or the ATIS which gives pilots the winds, temperature, pressure setting at their destination. And one of the things you can do in the FlyByWire A32X is that you can check all of this information on the EFB again. So there's a little widget where you can put in your arrival, destination, airport code, and it will give you all of the information that you need to program into the computer in order to tell the plane what is about to happen, basically.
It's always very useful to have good sources of information available. So it's very good that we have that available with all these different tools that you mentioned. So we are inbound to land. And by the way, throughout the course of my phone fell out, but that's fine. Throughout the course of the presentation, if anyone has any questions, we can maybe take a question every now and then. Any questions from the stage? Any questions from YouTube? No? Sorry? Oh.
I think that's gentleman.
5 Victor Charlie, Vector ILS, valet right, information Lima, descent flight level 40.
Question for you.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So, to my knowledge, I'm not really a pilot, but I think in commercial operations, the autopilot is indeed used commonly during the cruise section. Particularly, there's actually a section of airspace called RVSM airspace, which is the airspace above 29,000 feet, I think, where the use of the autopilot is required, because of course the autopilot is very good at what it's doing, and it can navigate very accurately. And what you can do is basically you can space planes much more tightly if you can rely on everyone having an autopilot that can fly precisely. And so for a lot of routes which go over this altitude of 29,000 feet, the use of autopilot is required basically in the cruise. When you turn on and off the autopilot is, I think, usually up to pilot's discretion to a certain degree. Some pilots prefer hand flying. Maybe if you fly 4 sectors back and forth to different cities, you prefer to use the autopilot a little bit more. Sometimes you connect the autopilot a little bit earlier. Sometimes you disconnect a little bit later. So in that sense, it's up to pilots. But I think during the cruise, for the most part, in commercial operations, the autopilot is used very commonly.
Yeah, very good question. Right, so I think as you were speaking, we were getting an instruction. So I think it was just a descent instruction. So we are now descending into Rotterdam, following the arrival here. Yeah. So obviously a very, very busy frequency there with, I think it's Amsterdam approach we are talking to right now. And yeah.
So maybe you can talk a little bit more about what an air traffic controller's thought process is in guiding all of these aircraft to the correct instrument landing system. What is there to learn? From a very naive point of view, it's hard for me to imagine what an air traffic controller's thought process is in getting all of these aircraft safely to their destination.
Good question. So there's a lot of different air traffic control positions, which means every one air traffic controller could be doing something completely different to another one. I guess if we go by the process from bottom to top, we start with the delivery controller that has to give clearances to the aircraft. So then the delivery controller usually checks whether or not everything is okay with the flight plan, whether or not the route is okay, whether or not there's any amendments that need to be done, and then just plans how he's going to give the clearance to the next controller. To the pilot. The ground controller needs to be able to sequence aircraft for the departure of fleet. Getting a hand over here. But the ground controller needs to be able to obviously safely taxi other aircraft to the runway and also taxi arrival aircraft.
FlyByWire 32 inbound, Pampus flight level 50.
FlyByWire 32 Rotterdam approach. Hello, after Papa Alpha Mike, fly heading 200 radar vectors for ILS runway 24.
After Pampus heading 200 radar vectors for 24, FlyByWire 32.
So we have a radar vector to follow after Papa Alpha Mike. We're just going to pre-select that and prepare that. But as I was saying, a ground controller needs to be able to taxi a departing aircraft out, and there's a certain thought process to that. You need to be able to logically sequence aircraft so that when they take off, they don't interfere each other in a way. It's kind of difficult to explain, but that actually gets me to the role of a tower controller. Has 2 roles: safely depart aircraft, safely land aircraft, because the tower controller has authority over the runways. So when departing aircraft, the tower controller needs to make sure that 2 aircraft don't crash into each other, but also when they depart, but also that they do not cause any conflicts after they depart. If you have, for example, two planes that are going the same way in the same airport, same destination, then it's important to space them out a bit more so that they don't cause a conflict, so that they're not too close to each other once they are in the air. And then it's pretty simple for arrivals. It's to make sure that landing aircraft don't crash into other landing aircraft or departing aircraft, and to give landing clearances in due time. So then we get to the radar part.
Descend to flight level 40, transition level.
Descend flight level 40, FlyByWire 32.
Descent instruction there. So obviously now we are talking to a departure or approach controller. The departure or approach controller has to sequence arrivals in and make sure that they have a nice space, a good enough space in between them, which is known as sequencing. Departure controller or an aircraft controller controlling departures has to make sure that departures do not interfere with anything else. And lastly, we get to radar or center or controller, whatever you like to call it, covering the en route part of the flight. Pretty simple as well, to make sure that there's no collision going on with, there's no risk of collision. So you asked me what an air traffic controller looks for. Again, there's different things, but for a radar controller, I would say you're always scanning the picture, you're always analyzing it to see if anything needs to be done, if a new instruction needs to be given, and also checking whether or not there's going to be a conflict coming up soon.
Very good. Thank you so much for the explanation. Maybe I can give a little bit more insight into what a pilot might be doing at this stage of the flight. So they're preparing for the approach. That includes different things. So I talked about the instrument landing system earlier, and one of the things they will be doing very carefully is checking that they have set up the instrument landing system.
FlyByWire 32.
Is checking that they've set up the instrument landing system correctly. So that includes the frequency, basically, of the guidance beam that they'll be using for landing. Furthermore, they'll, of course, check the lateral and vertical trajectory of the aircraft. So something known as energy management, which is basically making sure you get the aircraft down at a reasonable speed, at a reasonable altitude to intercept this landing system and effectively land at your destination. So that's something they'll be focusing on at this point. And of course, here you need a little bit of coordination between controller and pilot, because a pilot might not know what the controller's intentions are, and the controller has to rely on the pilot's ability to correctly execute the instructions in order to sequence and space all the aircraft correctly, as you mentioned.
Sounds like a lot of things on the plate of a pilot, which I guess brings you back to the point of how it's very important to, when you do have it available, have two pilots available in the cockpit. But when you don't, either you have to manage everything yourself, or you can use some of the amazing assisting tools that you guys are obviously working on.
Yeah, so one of the things that we, not so recently anymore at this point, but one of the things that we worked really hard on was the vertical navigation capabilities. And I think looking at the screens, one of the things that you can see is on the MCDU, they're just activating the approach phase.
Navigation to Atwit, cleared ILS approach, runway 24.
Direct Atwit, cleared ILS 24, FlyByWire 32.
This is actually a good example. The things that I was going to mention is the vertical navigation capability. So at all points during the flight, the plane basically calculates a vertical that the pilots can follow for a very efficient flight, and something that people or pilots will look at in order to judge their energy and judge the vertical profile is this green dot that you can see on the primary flight display. This is what the aircraft thinks the altitude the plane thinks you should be at in order to follow this basically most efficient trajectory. And it's a very useful tool for pilots to judge their energy situation, as we say, or basically where they are vertically and where they have to be in order to land the plane safely.
I think it both sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple when you come to think of it. So we are now cleared for the ILS. We are flying direct to Atwit, which is the initial approach fix for the ILS procedure for runway 24. So in other words, you could say that that's where officially the ILS starts. I'm not quite sure if we are already on the localize and the glide slope. Definitely not on the glide slope. I don't know if you can see.
It's a bit hard to see from
It's
here.
a bit hard to see.
I fully trust our pilots that they've managed to intercept the localizer.
Of course, of course. So from then, they will be using the ILS system to guide themselves down to the runway. Obviously, information on the ILS, about the ILS is available on the chart. Again, available via the Navigraph EFB integration. So, what's the process going to be like? Because I understand that landing is a critical stage of flight, as they like to say.
Very much so. I agree with that. That's a good statement. Yeah. So I think we'll see how Aaron does. I think I've seen him land a plane. He can definitely land a plane. You know, I think landing is one of those things that really needs practice at the end of the day. There's, of course, guides, and we describe how to land the plane. But at the end of the day, it just takes a little bit of practice. And now all landings will be equally good. Not all landings will be you'll be equally happy with as a pilot. I think you just need a little bit of patience and maybe a little bit of not losing your motivation to fly when you botch a landing. I certainly botched many landings. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that you have to be prepared when you're learning the aircraft. And there's a lot of things going on. For example, as they're landing, pilots may already be thinking about the next steps, as a good pilot should do. Because, of course, as soon as they land, there might be more air traffic control instructions, like that from that ground position that you talked about earlier, who will be giving instructions to the pilot about where to park and what taxiways to take. And there's going to be a whole lot of other traffic, which is a part of flying that's also...
Confirm established on the localizer.
Affirm, localizer established, FlyByWire 32.
There you go. So you just heard it that they are...
Contact Rotterdam Tower, 118.205.
Tower 118.205 by FlyByWire 32.
They are indeed established on the localizer, and I think they'll be established on the glide slope, which is the vertical part of the ILS, guiding them towards the runway.
FlyByWire 32 established ILS 24.
FlyByWire 32, goedendag. Runway 24, clear to land. Wind 150 degrees, 1 knot.
24 clear to land, FlyByWire 32.
Just checked in with the tower controller there, who's given them their landing clearance.
So, we are clear to land, and we are inbound. So, Valentin, you talked about the fact that, you're always learning, you're always preparing, but you're always learning. I actually thought about one thing that I didn't mention, that is available on VATSIM that I'd like to mention, and that is pilot training. Pilot training is a feature that we have, on VATSIM, which consists of what's known as ATOs, Authorized Training Organizations. They are basically organizations within VATSIM or communities where you can go and improve your flying if you're not so sure about that. If you're a bit insecure, I guess, about your flying. I know I am. So there's different things that you can do within the ATO. You can get different pilot ratings, just like in real life. You can get your PPL, and you start off very basic. I remember I was doing a session with an instructor with an ATO, where I was being taught how to properly do VFR circuits or VFR patterns, which I didn't know how to do. So I would strongly recommend, if you're interested, to join a VATSIM ATO and improve your knowledge or improve your skills through that.
Very good. I think it's an excellent tool, and I think you should definitely check it out. Now, you mentioned that you've also flown VFR, so visually on VATSIM. Is there any restrictions to the type of flying that I can do on VATSIM or the type of aircraft? Can you tell us a little bit more about that, maybe?
I can, of course. So, first of all, you can fly anywhere in the world. There's no restrictions like, you can't fly in this country, you can't fly in that country. You can fly anywhere in the world, anywhere that you would like. You can fly in any plane that you, I say any plane, you don't want to fly the Dark Star, that is an imaginary plane from Top Gun, Maverick. No, you can fly any plane that you can fly. You still have to be able to, for example, follow headings or follow certain speeds or altitudes. And then also, if you're flying instrumentally as well, you have to be able to fly, or you have to be able to have navigational capabilities, which is why you would, for example, choose to fly the FlyByWire A320. You can fly with instruments or visually, and then even fighter jets as well. You can technically, now I'm going to be very careful here, you can technically fly with fighter jets, as long as you fly IFR or VFR, as long as you do a normal flight in a fighter jet. You can also use any call center that you would like and fly from A to B, IFR or VFR. So about military then. What if you want to do something military? Now, obviously, we have DCS, that is quite a decent military simulator. But actually, VATSIM has what's known as VSOAs, Virtual Special Organization organizations. Don't quite remember the abbreviation. But the VSOAs are basically virtual military organizations that you can join, and you can be a part of that community where they fly, where they do military procedures. For example, you can join VRAF, Virtual Royal Air Force. You can join actually one that I'm a part of. It's called BVA Military. It's US based in the Boston area. So yeah, but I'm looking at the flight and it looks like we are landing.
Yeah, looking very good. The pilots are established on the instrument landing system. We have the runway in sight. It's a, well, maybe not a beautiful day. It is a nice day in Rotterdam. And we'll shortly, I assume, we'll see the pilots disconnect the autopilot, take over, and land the aircraft on the runway.
So what goes through the mind of a pilot when you're landing? What are you thinking of? What are some of the risk factors?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So I think it's one of the important things about specifically flying the Airbus, from what I've heard, is that you should be making very small corrections to keep the airplane on its flight path, because most of the time the way that you've set up the aircraft for the approach with the autopilot, you're going to be pretty much following or basically aiming towards the runway already, and you don't have to make much correction at all. So I think we'll see Aaron has disconnected the autopilot at this point, and as you can see, the runway is not moving much at all in the pilot's window, and that's exactly how it should be. That's how you keep a stable approach and a safe landing.
Very good. So, Aaron, good luck. We're breaking 200 feet, I think, now. So, let's watch the landing.
Very good. There's touchdown. Very impressive landing. I think a round of applause is...
So,
awesome.
From the ATC perspective, the pilot will shortly be, or our flight will shortly be receiving instructions to vacate the runway and taxi to a gate. So, this we've now completed the most crucial, well, one of the most crucial parts of the flight. I guess this is a good time to ask, does the audience have any more questions? Now I'm gonna cover the lights for a second. Any questions from the stage? Oh, yes.
FlightByWire 32 vacating Victor 2.
FlightByWire 32, welcome to
Sorry,
Rotterdam.
if you can give us 1 second.
Bravo 2 via Yankee.
Bravo 2 via Yankee FlightByWire 32.
No, taxiing scale. I apologize, yes. So the question is, there is an arrival and approach frequency. What is the difference? In practice, it's the exact same thing, but certain countries have different names. In the Netherlands, for example, you say Schiphol arrival. No, sorry, you say Schiphol approach, but in some places you can say, I don't know, for example, Dubai arrivals, you say. It's the same position, it's still the same approach position that guides aircraft down towards the runway to land there. So arrival and approach is the same, well, can be considered the same frequency, if that answers your questions. Great. I'm not a controller from the Dutch VCC, so I'm not an expert, I wouldn't say. But do we have any Dutch VCC experts in the audience? Okay, so in that case, I would recommend that you go visit this Dutch VCC stand afterwards, and you can ask them. They know all about the procedures in Schiphol and how that works. So, I'm not sure how much time we have left to asking the backstage. Do we have a lot of time left, or? 2 minutes. Okay, we have 2 minutes.
Perfect. I think the timing was quite good. The pilots are start parking up. They're getting ready to shut down the engine, shut down the engines, shut down the plane, shut down the plane's electrical system, deboard and get ready to go home to their wife and kids or their spouses. And I think this is pretty much the end of the presentation for us as well. So we're open for any questions, or maybe if you have something to add, David, now would be the time to ask, certainly.
The one thing I have to add from the VATSIM perspective is if you're not a member of VATSIM yet, and if this sounded interesting to you, if what you saw, Sage, and what I talked about sounded interesting to you, then you can go to VATSIM.net and go on the website and you can register today. We have one requirement, well, we have a few other requirements, but the main requirement is you need to be 13 years old. Unless anyone has any more questions, yes, we have a question from the internet.
From the internet. I am not the internet. I'm just reading on behalf of the internet. So this is more geared towards the FlyByWire team. They're asking, will FMS V2 implement the go-around procedures?
That is an excellent question. Yes, indeed it will. So FMS V2, for those that don't know, is our new version of the flight management system. It's something I hinted at the start, and FMS V2 will indeed add those go-around tracks. I think it's something that you might have seen on if you watch real videos on YouTube. I certainly do. It's a blue line that you see on the navigation display to fly the missed approach procedures, and it's one of those automation features that really helps pilots, especially single pilots, follow these procedures, and it relieves a lot of workload. As a matter of fact, you can fly the entire missed approach with the autopilot in the Airbus, and yes, indeed, FMS V2 will contain missed approach procedures. Thank you. Good question.
Thank you. And the final question we have from the internet, any ETA on the other engine variants for the A320NX?
So the A320neo comes with two different engine options. One is the CFM LEAPS, and the other option is the Pratt & Whitney. They're two different manufacturers. They're two different providers of the new engine option in the A320neo. And the way we usually go about it is that we're at the moment focusing on getting the CFM LEAPS correctly working and all of the things behind the scenes, the simulation working properly before trying to implement new engine options like the Pratt & Whitneys. But it's something that is certainly on the roadmap for down the line and something that we're considering to implement. But at the moment we're focusing on the CFM LEAPS. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have wrapped up. We are now nearly in a cold and dark situation again. The pilots are packing their bags and going home. So thank you very much to Aaron, pilot flying today, and Dimitri, pilot monitoring. And that'll be us leaving the stage. So thank you for us. And we've got 1 hour left before FS Weekend closes. So have fun, guys.
Thank you very much, everyone.